We have like 8 or 9 of them. How's it going, guys? Azameo here with BigRia.com, and we're going to talk about estoppel certificates, estoppel letters right now. So I'm going to get right into it and tell you exactly what they are, but I'm going to tell you the craziest story you've ever heard about estoppel certificates. If you're not familiar with them, I promise you'll never forget what they are after this. It's how I've always remembered them. And actually, if you want the basics on it, Anissa did a great class on this. And this page here, every time you put a page up, this whole project is about how to build a brain surgeon's income by building your real estate business, and then using that skill to go out and build other businesses and buy and sell other companies with that same skill. So you use real estate as a punching bag. That's what BigRia.com is all about. That's our entire focus. So whenever I put up a post or a page or we talk about anything, I want that page to be the most helpful resource on that topic. So if you ever go, the link is in the description. Go check it out. It explains everything about estoppel certificates, everything you need to know. And if there's something I'm missing, please let me know. Just take 30 seconds in the comments and let us know. We read that stuff. Our team, we take it seriously. We'll improve it and make sure that if we didn't answer your question, we'll get to it. So what is an estoppel certificate? Let's say you go to a tenant and somebody says to you, it's a commercial property, and he says, I have 5 tenants. Each of them are paying me $5,000 a month. So I'm making $25,000 a month. How would you verify that, right? How would you know that? And he may show you, earnings and income statements and stuff like that. But ultimately, what you really want are the tenants to go out and provide documentation saying, yes, we've been paying him $5,000 a month. We've been doing it for 2 years, and we have 5 years left on our contract or 1 year left on our contract. And they're going to outline the relationship that the owner has with that tenant. But estoppel it could be with the homeowners association. You could say to the homeowners association, has this individual, like on a single family residential, homeowners associations have a lot of power. Don't ever forget that. It's really important. A lot of investors, especially newbies, forget how they can foreclose on a property. They have a lot of power. So don't just blow them off or anything. One great tool to use an estoppel for is with the homeowners association. They can go in and they can verify that, yes, this homeowner has paid his dues on time. We haven't had any issues. We don't have any claims against him, which is the most important part of the estoppel certificate, is the claims part, assuming that everything else is in line. Because what you don't want is you don't want to buy a property and then the tenant comes back and says, well, you have to build a $10 million water park or something like that, something crazy. That would be a little extreme, but they might say something like, you need to build, you're supposed to pave the driveways, or you're supposed to add an extra level or an extra, a parking garage, or you're supposed to have valet parking, or you're supposed to build a restaurant or improve the restaurant that's on the property, or anything. It could be residential or multifamily or a commercial property. Which would be, I guess, commercial as well. But I mean, like, it could be apartments, or it could be like a strip mall of businesses. You don't want a tenant to come back and say, oh, you're supposed to do this thing for me. And that's what the estoppel certificate's all about. The most important part of that is the claim section, the claim section. And this is with whether it's, and every business basically has this. When you're going to buy a business and you want to talk to the vendors and see how much are the vendors paying, especially like radio stations, do this, trucking companies, medical, billing. We worked with, it's not necessarily an estoppel certificate. They may call it something else, but all the money that comes into the business, let's say you have an advertising agency, or let's say you have a radio station and somebody's running ads with you, and you say, well, they have a contract for 10 years to spend $1,000 a week, for 5 years or so. What an estoppel certificate in that example will do, it won't be called an estoppel. They would look at the contract and you would talk to the advertisers. But basically, you're just trying to verify that income. It's the same thing with the property, right? So it's very easy to understand when you look at it that way. You want to verify the claims that the owner is making, and the tenants are going to do that. They're going to go out, and these can be a lot of information. Let me scroll down. So how reliable or trustworthy is this? These are questions that came up. We listen to you guys. When you guys have questions, we refine what we put here. So the question of how reliable or trustworthy is an estoppel, it's very trustworthy, because what the tenant is signing off on is they're legally binded to that, and it doesn't allow for them to contradict it later and say, oh yeah, I said that, but I didn't mean that. So if they say, yeah, I have no claims against the owner, that's what you want to hear. You don't want to hear that they're like, oh, he was supposed to pay for this parking garage, or he was supposed to repair the roof and he hasn't done it yet. This is a red flag, and you want to make sure that gets settled before you close on a property. You or your clients or anyone you're working with, get the estoppel, find out what the tenants are paying, the relationship they have, and then go in and make sure that you get everything done. Other uses, banks. Anytime you refinance a property, anytime you go in and say my property makes this much money, here's how much my tenants are paying, banks are going to want to see this. Anytime there's a net worth calculation, evaluation of estate, a probate evaluation, and this may take a long time. If you're going through probate and you have an income property that may have 20 tenants, or you may have 30 high-paying tenants. If it's a big estate, this estoppel process can take time. Sometimes if there's fights among, we've had situations where kids or people who are inheriting a property are fighting over it in court, and the judge will appoint an attorney to gather estoppel certificates. That's the first step in establishing the value of the land, of the property. So estoppel certificates for real estate investors, you're going to want these. Anytime you look at any income property, you're going to want to see these. You're going to want to get an idea of what is happening. Anytime you're inheriting tenants, you want to know what the situation is, if they have any claims. So there's 10 key points here. We've talked about this in the video. Agreements made with previous owners, you want to know that. You want to know a list of who owns what property. You don't want someone coming back and saying, oh, I can take the fridge, or I can take the table if it's a furnished unit, or I get to take the drywall or something, or the water heater or something like that. You don't want them coming back and saying that stuff. Any repairs that are needed that are at the time of the purchase. This is really important. Whenever tenants, this includes maintenance, they are basically saying all the maintenance and all the repairs are up to date. I have no claims or anything. Any pets allowed on the property. This isn't as much of a big deal in America, but overseas, this is a huge deal because people have crazy pets. I mean, they might bring an elephant in their backyard, and you gotta have the legal documentation that's an issue. In America, you do have situations where, let's say it's a pet store. We have had this happen, and they bring in what's called a high-risk breed, which could be a German Shepherd or a Doberman Pinscher, but it might be another. Your insurance company might have another. They just want to charge you more every month, right? So their list of high-risk breeds is going to be as long as possible, and that's why you want to have this information documented for them beforehand. Who pays utilities, when rents are due, the exact amount, all this stuff is in that estoppel. It can be a multi-page document. Some tenants, honestly, are going to be a pain in the ass about this. They're not going to do it. They're not going to take it seriously. So the way it works is the owner gives them a certain deadline to do it, and if they don't do it, then the owner can fill it out, and then the tenant, at the very least, they have to sign it. But whatever they sign on, that is written in stone, right? So it has a lease with terms and dates, security deposit. This is really important, especially with commercial units and like factories. Any security deposits that might be due back to the renter, you want to know about that stuff. Any refundable, non-refundable amounts, any kind of that stuff. Insurance claims. So any and all claims. So check that out, and this is all in the document. We have an example of a certificate you can download here for free. Just go to bigria.com. The link's in the description. So that's kind of a rundown of this estoppel, this certificate. Let me tell you the story though. This is what all that stuff you could maybe remember, don't remember. But here's what happened and why this is just like burned in my memory. It has been for all these years. So we work with a lot of medical companies, a lot of medical businesses. It's one of our, for years we've done this. And one of the things that everybody in the medical field does, every doctor, anybody you talk to, the first thing they want to do is like get out of the business because there's so many regulations. Everybody in the medical field is making more money. Nurses, hospitals, insurance companies, HMOs, everyone's making more money. Even like the parking attendants are making more money. The parking garages are making more money. But the one group of people that are making less money in the medical field, of course, the doctors. And so they want to get out of that field. As soon as a doctor opens his practice, I can tell you, as soon as a doctor opens his practice, he wants to just replace his income and find some way to not be there. But the higher up that income ladder they are, like if they're surgeons or specialists, it's harder for them to, they kind of got like golden handcuffs. It's hard for them to move out of there to replace that income and move on to something else. So one of the things we always do when we work with people in the medical field is we get them into real estate. These are great people. To a lot of people think doctors are cheap and stuff. That's not true. They've got they do a lot of stuff. They look at like Doctors Without Borders, and like they do a lot of great work. Doctors, the medical field in general is a great community to connect with, and it's something, if you want to be in real estate, talk about private money. When people, it's amazing to me, all these years I've been in real estate, people think money is hard to find, and it's like the easiest thing in the world. There's much more money than brains. But anyway, one of the ways that we work with doctors, and this is something you can start doing, if you want to start buying medical clinics and start owning medical clinics, this is one way to trade your real estate expertise to get leverage in their business. And here's what you're going to do. The first real estate that they can buy is the actual, the place that they're renting from, the commercial units that they're renting from. So let's say it's a physical therapy place, and then maybe they're doing surgery, or maybe they're doing some other kind of pain management, or maybe they're doing, I wouldn't say chiropractors, but, I don't want to say they aren't real doctors, but you want to get into somebody who's actually, a lot of times chiropractors are just like dressed like hippies. They're not very professional. They have kind of like laid back, and they're not as aggressive with their business. That's just overall. Okay. I'm generalizing, but when you have a doctor who's serious, who has a real practice, their location is really important. And in almost no case will you see someone who's actually buying that entire commercial property. It's the first thing they should do, because they probably have a good relationship with the owners or with management, and they know that they make good money because they're a doctor. The management knows that about the tenant. So we start buying that place. So here we had a deal where we're buying this commercial property for $5 million. That's how much they're buying that property for. And everything went great. Everything went brilliantly. They had money. They took that pile of cash he was making and started putting it towards the property. And then over time it started making him money. He was happy because there were 2 doctors, and they were thrilled because now they've got some secondary income, and they're finally starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel, that they can leave their property. So we started telling, other people around in that area knew that we were, actively buying these commercial properties. So about 2 years later, a guy across the street says, he had a commercial property. He said he wanted to sell it. It was him, and it was a family property. He said they want to sell it for $8 million, and it was worth about $8 million. So, and that's another thing, is that when you're doing this, you don't need to find great deals. You can make great deals because you know tenants that would be a good fit, and you know how to make money. It's what we call that value contrast. The reason why people have such a hard time finding great deals is because they don't have anything special that they're bringing to the table. And so like they have to buy a $100,000 property for like $30,000, which anybody knows they can make money with that. But when you have some hook, something special you bring to the table, a faster way of getting financed, or that you know how to do, for example, the lender agent model, or you do what we teach and you build multiple models, so you're making money in several different ways, then you don't need to find great deals. You can take ordinary deals that people are walking away from, and you can find gold in them. And that's what this was. We knew we could make a lot of money with that $8 million property, buying it. I won't get into that stuff, but there's a lot of ways where when you finding commercial tenants, ways that you can start getting ownership in their companies as well and help them market. Because we're doing the same marketing for this medical clinic, and we know the kinds of medical clinics that would be great to be right across the street, so we could bring them in at a premium. So we have a hook, we have a secret weapon here to make more money with that property. Anyway, here's the thing. Getting to the estoppel letter, right? Get to the point. But I'm giving you all that background information for an important reason, because we had that property we're going to buy for $8 million, right? And this is like, this is years ago. I'm just like a kid in a candy store. I didn't have the experience I have right now. I screwed up a lot of things. There's the feather. Check that out. It's really pretty, right? You know what? We have pictures of these that people have been drawing, some of the special needs kids, and there's some really gorgeous, really, really pretty pictures. I'll start putting them up. You guys can see them. They're going to go up with our comics. They're the ones who do the comics, which is great. People have been asking about. Okay, so we have this tenant, right? So we're going to buy this property for $8 million. What do? We get the estoppel letters. We look at what are each of those tenants paying paying that owner, right, to make the property worth $8 million. And one of these estoppel letters was like this giant stack of papers. It was like 1,000 pages. It was this really thick. Well, not 1,000, but it was hundreds of pages. It includes all documentations and these like personal notes and all kinds of like weird stuff. And our attorney's going through it, and he said on page 92 or something, there was this note that said, this like tiny like out of the way thing this guy put. The tenant was an attorney, the tenant of this property across the street, the $8 million property, and he put this note that said that he had a $5 million claim against the owner. A $5 million claim. So we talked to this guy. We said, hey, you said there was nothing in the estoppel letter, no big deal, but there's a $5 million claim. And the guy's like, oh, I'm sorry. I don't know how that happened, which is weird because, like I said, when you sign it, it's legally binding. Like, and he's like, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't. We were, he was apologetic. We kind of gave him the benefit of the doubt. We said, okay, fine. Why don't you resubmit the real estoppel letter? So he resubmits it. Our attorney goes through it, and it's on page 104 now. It's buried a little bit further back, and it's not $5 million. It's like $4.2 million. But the same thing. We go back to him. We're like, hey, what's going on? What are you doing here? And he's like, oh, I'm sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. It's kind of like, at this point, it's like a little shady. So we say, okay, why don't you this time make sure it's real. Go through every line. Maybe just give us a shorter estoppel. We don't need, a novel. It's not like Lord of the Rings every day that he's bringing us as his estoppel letter. So why don't you bring us a valid one that you're sure is accurate? So he comes back a third time with an estoppel certificate, which this is like already crazy, right? Anybody would tell you that you should not handle it. I didn't know what I was doing. But we come back, our attorney goes through and he's like, I don't believe it. Again, we have the $5 million claim on page like 130 something. He puts this $5 million claim back in the property. And at that point, I should have known that, this guy, and I really was like highly skeptical and suspicious of this guy. But it's a weird thing when you meet someone face to face and they're like, oh yeah, it's totally like, you kind of start, you think like, that guy's, he can't be lying about something that's so easy to verify, right? It's just a weird thing. So we went back, we told the owner, we said, here's what's happening with this estoppel letter. He says you owe him $5 million. And the guy is looking into it and he's like, well, what happened? So here's what happened. About maybe a year before we had talked, a year or so before we had talked, the tenant went to the owner and he said, hey, I need high-speed internet. And the internet, like in the Midwest, it can be like kind of like that hamster in the wheel, or like, 2 cups in a string. Like it can be really slow. But it wasn't that slow on the property. He wanted ultra high-speed internet, which to do that, like we had on our property because we were across the street, you'd have to dig up the cable and actually run it right to the telco or to the cable line. And it cost like $500,000 to do that. So this tenant said to the owner, he said, the owner's like, I'm definitely not going to pay $500,000 just so the internet's like an inch faster. I mean, the internet's okay right now. It's not like it is across the street, but it's okay. And in big cities, this isn't a problem. But in like the Midwest, this is almost always an issue. But this wasn't, like the internet wasn't terrible over there. But this guy said that he needed it for his business. So he made a deal with the owner. He said, how about this? I'll pay the $500,000 for the digging up and running the cable to the property. And then you can go to the tenants and offer them this high-speed, ultra high-speed internet. And if you make any money, we'll just split the money that you make. And the owner's thinking about it, and he says, we can do that, but I don't think anyone's going to want to pay this high premium for higher speed internet. You're the only person that has a problem with it. It doesn't seem like a good idea for you to do. And the guy says, well, I just want to do it because it's that invaluable to me to have high speed internet. And now the seller, why would he turn that down? Why would the owner turn that down, right? This guy's going to pay $500,000, and whatever money you make, you're just going to split it with him. So worst case scenario, you're no worse off, right? And you have potential to make money and no potential to lose money. So the seller agreed. They signed this basically like a letter of intent, like a very weak agreement that said the guy's going to pay $500,000 and fix his property up. So now that's the backstory here. So that's where the seller, because the owner, we kept telling him we have this like claim here, this $5 million claim for technology, a technology claim. He's saying that the property suffered by not having technology, and the owner's like, oh, that's right, we talked about the internet thing. So okay, here's what happens. He goes back to the tenant, right? This owner goes back to the tenant because we're not moving forward until this is resolved, this claim, right? Because we don't want to buy it and then now we inherit that claim, the $5 million claim. We got to get this guy to remove that claim. And it's a BS claim. So he goes to the tenant and he says, hey, this claim for $5 million is totally crazy. We need to remove it. And the tenant says, yeah, I'd be happy to remove it. Why don't we negotiate a settlement? What? Negotiate a settlement? And it was at that moment that all of us knew we're dealing with a shitball here. I mean, this guy is a real, he's trying something. So I'm not going to, I remember this whole situation with the estoppel letter. This guy, basically, he didn't know who I was, the attorney. He didn't know who I was. I don't mean it like that. I mean, he didn't know that I was that I worked across the street, basically, that I was a tenant. Or I presented myself because I was technically a tenant for that property across the street. I didn't tell him I was the owner or a part owner, and also that we were trying to buy that unit. Because I talked to him, because this was such a bizarre thing. This owner had known that tenant for years, and he refused to see any faults in him. He said, I've known this guy for 8 years. We've gone out to eat, and he's a good friend of mine. And I talked to him, and he seemed like a nice guy. So I went back and I talked to when I kind of wanted to do a little bit of investigation, undercover. So I went and talked to him, and when I told him that I was a tenant across the street, he said to me, you right now, because they're trying to buy this unit, you have a lot of power. With the estoppel agreement. If you want, I can show you what to do, and then you and I can split the money that you make. And now, not that it was a question earlier when he tells the owner, let's settle this. He wants money. He wants to get $100,000, $500,000, whatever, to move to back off this claim. Now we know what his plan was. This is what he does. I've never heard of this. And in all these years, I've talked to a lot of people. Nobody's ever seen this where somebody weaponized the estoppel agreement the way that this guy did. Basically, what he did was, as soon as he heard that the seller was selling, the owner was going to sell that property, the $8 million property, he needed something in writing, something. So he went to him and said, look, I'll pay $500,000. Think about it, this guy's been planning this for a while. He said, I'll pay $500,000 to dig this cable up. And then you and I will just split the money. Like, who wouldn't sign that? Now that he's got that signed, this isn't going to hold up in court, right? Because he's going to court, his claim is, because this technology, I based certain expansions of my business and blah, 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 and this didn't get done. What he doesn't say is it didn't get done because he didn't pay the $500,000. It doesn't matter. He just needs something, and he's an attorney, so he's just going to muck up the works. And in order for the owner to remove this, he's going to have to go to court, and this guy's an attorney. So this attorney was just playing hardball. His whole point was just to kick up enough dust and, cause enough problems, be that, that gum in the gears, so that they'll go back and say, okay, fine, here's $100,000, here's $200,000, just walk away, here's $50,000, whatever, just walk away from the deal. That's what he was trying to do. And so the bottom line is, the way that worked is, once I had that conversation with him, and the owner had that conversation, and we all knew this guy was just, we triangulated, we found out not only was he lying, but that this has been his plan for a while, and he was trying to just weaponize that estoppel agreement. I'd love to tell you that it went smoothly, but this owner was at one point, our attorney even told him, said, look, as crazy as it sounds, the quickest, easiest way to settle this is just to pay him. You're going to have to pay him something, because he's going to go to court, and it's going to take a long time. We're all going to lose money because it's going to take so much time, and you should just go pay him. And at one point, the owner was willing to pay the guy $50,000. Can you believe that? $50,000 out of and he killed him to do it. Him and his wife. It was a family property, like I said. They were all like, man, we should just go to his house in the middle of the night and they were just mad. They were country people, and they were really upset about it. But I remember when I was walking on this deal, doing this deal, and they'd be walking me through the steps and walking me through the estoppel. They'd be like, "Did you check the estoppel certificate? Did you look at the estoppel letter?" And there's irregularities in the estoppel certificate. So I'd get off the phone with our attorney, then I'd call his attorney, talk about the estoppel. I used the word estoppel certificate, estoppel letter, estoppel maybe 200 times a day for like 6 weeks, 7 weeks, 8 weeks. Like, oh my gosh, like I never knew the estoppel agreement was so powerful that when the claim was in there, everything was halted, and he had to pay to get this guy to walk away to get his claim off. Anyway, the guy turned down $50,000. The attorney, when the owner went to him and said, "Listen, you son of a bitch, I fucking hate you, you motherfucker," like he was like, he was mad. He was really mad, and he was like, "But I'll pay him because the guy's holding everything up." But he went to him, he talked to him, and the guy was still like, "No, I don't want $50,000. I want he wanted like $200,000-$300,000. He's like, "This is a $5 million claim." But it took us months. The whole process I'm talking about finding out what this guy was really, that took about a month and a half, like 6 weeks, 7 weeks for us to figure out, like, wow, this guy really is going to be a piece of shit about this. Like, because it's like, you don't want to believe that, right? But then ultimately it took about 18 months, almost 2 years for us to complete that deal, because he didn't want to pay him any more than the $50,000, and he was mad at him, and they'd go back and forth. And he launched, at one point, the attorney launched a lawsuit against us, against the property that our client had, the $5 million property, because they were mucking up, they were bullying or intimidation or some level of trying to affect his claim on this purchase. It was crazy. It was just totally nuts, totally bazonkers. It was completely nuts. And I've always, like, the estoppel letter, I just, like, in my mind, that's how I learned about the estoppel letters and the importance of them. And then, like, I hadn't talked about it as much, or whenever I tell anyone this example, I've tried to meet someone who had a crazier story. No one that I've ever heard of has had a crazier example of somebody weaponizing the estoppel like this. And then when Anissa was talking to me and she said a question came in about estoppel letters, I was like, estoppel? Like, oh, like I've got like this trauma about these estoppel letters. But this is a big deal, and people can really cause a lot of problems about this. And how long? Wow, it's been like 20 minutes now I'm talking about this. I didn't mean to talk so much about this, but I wanted to tell you that the estoppel letter really is something to think about. Look at these comics. I love these comics. These, we've had, when kids go through these, especially like when we work with a lot of the kids are like special needs kids, we were trying to get them to pay attention. We try to gamify the learning process, and that's what happened. They said, well, why don't we write a comic book about it? And so they write these comic books that are like, Elsie didn't listen to our class, and then his clients were so mad they took a blowtorch to his privates, to the crazy stuff. Don't get a blowtorch taken to your privates. Download our free class, which, by the way, get the free report. Make sure you get emails from me. Don't get a blowtorch taken to your privates. Get this free stuff for me, from us. You're going to love the stuff you get from us. So hopefully this helps you understand about estoppel certificates, and I hope you never forget about them ever again. The estoppels, man, I've been I got these memories, estoppel certificates, every time I hear of them. Now, whenever you see me smile or laugh whenever someone brings it up, you'll know why. Okay, you guys, I love you guys so much. All right, take care. If there's any other questions you have, again, like I said, this page should be helpful, and it should give you all the answers you want about estoppel certificates. If that doesn't happen, please let me know, and we'll make sure that we get you where you should be. All right, thanks so much. We'll talk soon, guys. Take care. Thanks.